Welcome back to Yev's Builds, and in today's episode I'm going to show you how to make your S85 V10 Vanos go from this ugly piece of aluminum to this. Let's go, dude. So if you don't already know, for the last way too long I've been rebuilding the V10 in order for me to actually swap it into an E46 M3. I have the shell already, the engine is almost done, I'm still waiting for some parts to come in. In the time being, I posted on my Instagram asking you guys if you want to see a video of me polishing my Vanos units, and a lot of you reached out and said yes, please do it, because we want to see my attention to detail. So today I'm going to show you the nitty bitty picky stuff that nobody's even going to pay attention to but myself, but apparently you guys seem to enjoy. So let me show you what I'm doing. Well, believe it or not, this one at some point did look exactly like this one. It's not terribly difficult to make this look just like that. All it is just a lot of patience and a lot of free time on your hands, which clearly I have with 2.5M cars. First off, you want to plug up every port, every hole that we're gonna have something going through. So where the solenoids are gonna be sitting, you wanna plug it up completely, remove all the O-rings, clean it up. What I found useful while doing the first one is you could take a little needle like this, just kind of scrape off all those corners where there's a bunch of gunk stuck, get all the big pieces that are just stuck onto the aluminum off. If you scratch it just a little bit, it's not the end of the world. We are going to be polishing this, so gentle surface rubs like that and most of it will come off. After that, you want to take some sort of degreaser, some sort of lacquer thinner, wipe down the entire surface area dry and clean so that you get rid of all the dust. The polish I'm using is Mother's Magna aluminum polish. Any auto parts store you could pick that up. You're obviously going to need a Dremel and then a bunch of these bits for the Dremel itself. You could buy a full bag of these for 10 bucks off of Amazon, and it's going to have all sorts of bits on there. You're going to have some super small pointy ones, you can have some sort of bigger ones, and there should be some medium ones up in there. Yep. What I found to be very useful is quality over quantity. What I mean by that is when you're going to be applying this Mother's aluminum polish on here, do not apply a whole bunch. Focus on one area at a time, right? So for example, just start doing it with this one. Focus on this area right here, put ever so slightly on there, and then get it and spread it all over the place, make it even and consistent. What I liked doing was using a bigger bit and getting rid of everything as much as I can with the big guy. Once everything's pretty much clean, you take the smallest, sharpest guy, get into all those corner pieces, right? Get into all those corners where you couldn't get with the big boy, get all those ridges right there, get all that cleaned up, and then take the medium one, the smaller but not the big circle, and then you get everything else that you possibly could reach. It's not going to be entirely perfect. There's going to be a few areas that you're just not going to be able to get unless you found some sort of better pieces than I did, which if you did, let me know, but that is my approach of doing this. The best speed on the Dremel is probably somewhere in the middle, about 5. One thing, keynote, do not press down on the aluminum all that hard. Pretty much just use the weight of the actual Dremel itself. Do not press on it, do not push it in. If you're going to be pushing it too hard, the polish is just going to be burning up, and it's actually going to smear it rather than polish anything. In essence, those are the key points, but I will guide you through this as we're doing this together. So, put your safety glasses on, and let's get to it. Alright, so once this is completely dried up, put a big wheel on the Dremel, take a little dab, something like that, just a little dab, and I am first going to focus on this general area right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it and just kind of smear it all over the place, just like so. And then turn it up to medium speed and get it off as much as you possibly can. Take your time with it, do not press hard, remember that. Once you start seeing it being a little bit dry and there's no more moisture left, that's when you can freely stop buffing it, and you can take it and wipe it off. And look at this already. Such a big difference. Clearly this is not done. This is going to take a few rounds. That's just the general idea. Like I said, it takes a lot of patience, but it's definitely doable. Let's get with it. Look at that. Starting to look a little bit more promising. If you do have a lot of buildup, kind of like it is in this case, what really helps is if you take this little medium bit and you take buffing compound, because what we're doing here is we're polishing, right? This is polish. Buff compound, it's a little bit more aggressive, it's more of a coarse kind of situation. It's gonna get rid of a bunch of these big nasty spots. If yours is looking pretty clean, you don't really need to do this. Generally a good idea to take a small buffing wheel and take some buffing compound instead and buff off all the big crud first. Again, do not put too much of the stuff because because it won't do any good. It's just actually gonna make more damage. Put it on a low speed, get that buffing compound up in there, turn up the speed now. In essence, this takes a lot of patience and a lot of time. After that, after you give it a few rounds, I like to take that same pick and just kind of get rid of a bunch of other stuff that I wasn't able to get rid of before. Kind of go back in there. If you scratch it just a little bit, it's not a big deal. We're gonna make a few rounds with that compound again, and we're gonna get all those scratches out, and then we'll polish them up. But yeah, man, the main point here is consistency. Do not get discouraged because one round of polishing, this is not gonna look all too good. You're gonna have to probably make it like 4 or 5 rounds until it starts to look somewhat decent, and it takes a lot of time. Again, this buff compound is in extreme cases if something just does not come off, but in reality, this polish is doing a pretty good job. So do not get ahead of yourself, just focus on one area at a time, and it should be pretty good. Like, just honestly, it's just consistency at this point. So let's get at it again. Put a little dab like that. At first, putting a little bit more is not a bad idea. The closer you get to finishing, the less polish you want to use. I mean, look at that shine. Literally, all it is just consistency. That's it, dude. Consistency and patience, 2 things that are valuable in polishing. Believe me, I used to polish for a living. That's what it is, dude. Use big wheels first, use the very smallest pointy ones in all the crevices second, and then use the medium polish wheels last to kind of polish off the entire rest of the thing. For the most part, this thing's starting to look way better than it did before, right? There's still a bunch of blemishes all in the corners. All those corners are kind of messed up still. Everything that I was able to get with the big bit, I got. And now it's time to move on to this very small and sharp bit that I created. Pretty much you take one of these bits that's already existing, put it up under a razor, and you sharpen it up and make it super sharp. That's really all it is to it. We're gonna do the exact same thing. We're going to dip it into polish. I'm gonna try to get all those areas that are in the very deep corners that I just seriously cannot get with any sort of bit except for a really small sharp one. So we're gonna do the exact same thing that we did with the big bit, but now with a thin bit, and just kind of clean up all those corners and edges that you couldn't get to previously. So after you use the very small and thin bit, you can tell that all those edges are much cleaner. All those edges are way, way cleaner. You could tell. But this is another reason why I like to use the thin one before we get to the medium bit, right? Because you kind of tend to burn the spots around the area that you're buffing or polishing, right? So it creates kind of these scratch marks. It's hard to tell, but those little scratch marks right there, I would rather get all the edges out and then use the small medium bit and get these scratches out as a final buff and polish. Simply because once you get all those edges and corners out, it's much easier to get the dust out rather than these scratches that are gonna be left on the outside, right? So those scratches are pretty much we're just leaving for the very end. Once you're becoming really happy with your result and getting really close to where you want it to be, you just kind of take this and just even lighter, you kind of almost lift the Dremel off and just do a very light and thin coat of buff all around. At that point, take some sort of cloth material, wipe it all down completely, clean up this area right here because you don't want none of this polish and buffing compound to go into your engine after that. At this point, it's actually very important to buff until the buffing compound becomes dust. Don't leave any wet residue. That's the biggest thing, because that wet residue becomes very difficult to clean up unless it is completely dry and it kind of dries itself out as it goes, you know what I'm saying? So after you're done using this medium bit right there, yours might look actually better or might look worse than this one. You can't really tell on video too much, but there are some oxidation spots that I simply just cannot get rid of, like right there. I think the only way to get rid of oxidation spots like that is to use some sort of heavy grit sandpaper and then use slightly less grit paper, you know what I mean, and just keep going up until you get to the polishing point. In this case, I'm not too stressed about this simply because the solenoid units are going to be right here. They're going to be covering up majority of the spot, and this part of the engine isn't going to be really seen anyway, besides maybe this angle right here. Overall though, I am actually very satisfied with this. This one does not look as good as that first one that I've done, but I am happy with this. So the next step to this process is you take some sort of Q-tip like this and you get into every single crevice and corner piece that you couldn't get with a paper towel. Get rid of all sorts of residue that you may still have. After these Vanos units are completely buffed off and polished, take some lacquer thinner or something, clean it up, or maybe some warm soap water, clean it up a little bit, just make it dry and make it clean. Get rid of all sort of oils and dirt and just clean this thing up. What I'm going to do is actually apply the shark hide metal protectant. I bought this off of Eastwood. It's kind of spendy for a little bottle like this. It's about $70, but what this does, we're actually going to be protecting this aluminum. Since this is technically exposed aluminum, hence why it was so messed up and dirty in the first place, is because, well, oxidation occurs, you know what I mean? After all this work and effort was put in, I kind of want to protect this so that it would stay clean and shiny for as long as absolutely possible. It actually protects the metal that's listed above from all sorts of corrosion and oxidation and rust and all that, so you do want to use some sort of lint-free material, so like these blue paper towels or maybe like microfibers right here. You're gonna apply a little bit and you're gonna clean up this surface area. Wear some gloves, that way your hands don't leave any prints on this because this is gonna be kind of permanent. The colder the temperature outside of this Vanos is, the better it's gonna lay down and actually dry up. That's literally what it says on the bottle. This stuff does dry up pretty quickly, and if you don't move fast enough, it will leave streaks. Take a clean rag, apply this stuff on it, focus on one area, let it dry up, focus on the other area, dry up, put some more of this stuff on, focus on another area, let it dry up. Just kind of be efficient with this and be quick, but also do it right. After you're done with this entire thing, I would do another coat, just in case you missed some sort of spot or something. Make 2 layers of this stuff, and literally this stuff will be done and ready to be put on. I guess the only downside of this stuff is that it does make the Vanos a little bit less shiny, but as you can tell in the video, it's still very shiny. But also the texture changes of this a little bit. It becomes a little bit more grippy, not as slidey. Another reason why it's good to clean up your surface area before you apply this stuff is because the more coats you add, the more stuff that's still on the Vanos is gonna be stuck underneath that coat. We're not wiping this down. This literally adds a layer of stuff and material and chemicals onto the Vanos. It's pretty much like a clear coat at a certain point. You literally just apply, get into every little creases you possibly can. This shouldn't oxidize. This should stay looking good as it does already for a long, long time. Do not want to get this on your clothing. Do not want to get this on your eyes. Once the Vanos units are on the actual engine itself, if you're unaware of how to do timing properly on these V10s, I actually did a very instructional and detailed video on how to do that properly, so you could click right about here. But for now, I'm just gonna be installing the solenoids. These are actually OEM BMW. Believe me, these are a stupid amount of money, so if you're able to get these brand new OEM, preferably, do yourself a favor. I have not been hearing really good stories about any aftermarket solenoids actually at all. The best ones are to be the OEM ones. They are pretty pricey, but actually, speaking of that, those exact 4 right there, I actually purchased on ECS Tuning. One day I just logged in and I saw that they're having some sort of deal maybe or something, but they had a good deal for each solenoid. Usually from a dealer, each solenoid is roughly about $1,200 a piece, and there's 4 of them. And if you had a spun rod, chances are your solenoids are going out or going to go out really shortly. Like I had in my case, I had 5 spun rod bearings when I purchased this engine. Luckily, ECS was selling them for roughly about, I think, close to $700 a piece instead of $1,200. So in my book, that's a steal. I purchased them as fast as I could. Definitely put a hole in my pocket, but I had to do what I had to do. Regardless, if you're interested, maybe ECS is having another deal or something, so I'll link them right below. It's gonna have the part number and everything for these, but we're gonna install these. First and foremost, make sure that all your seals and O-rings are actually installed. And before we're gonna install them into the actual engine, we're gonna lube up every single O-ring and make them prepped. Before we stick these solenoids in, take this big boy over here, dip your finger into some oil, some engine oil, and lube up these seating areas right here on the Vanos, because that's where that O-ring is gonna go. Lube them up. The purpose of this is to actually have this O-ring sit down and actually hold itself up. That way it doesn't fall out when we're going to be putting the solenoids in. Once you have them lubed up, put the O-ring in, make sure it's sitting flush. Don't bend it, don't twist it. Just like so. It's also not a bad idea to lube up the O-ring itself. It's never a bad thing. That way it's actually going to be nice and soft when the solenoid goes in. Then take some more oil, lube up the inside of the solenoid. Now do the exact same thing for the O-rings on the solenoid itself. Lube them up from all ways. There you go. That will clip in just like that. And now take a T25 Torx and lock these solenoids in with their corresponding bolts. Tighten little by little, one at a time. And that is that. You have a beautiful set of Vanos now with some beautiful solenoids, and your engine is looking that much more beautifuler. Nice, dude, this is exciting. Well, and on that note, I guess this is gonna be the end of this video. This is how you polish up V10 Vanos. Dude, in my opinion, these look way cooler. They look way more cool than they were before. less dull, more shiny, more attention grabby, you know what I mean? So that's cool stuff. If you're into this kind of stuff, keep in tune, because as you know, this V10 is going into an E46 M3. The shell is right outside. So if you like this kind of stuff, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. I know it's cliche, but that stuff works, and I really appreciate you guys. Peace.